Welcome to the Work Heartily podcast, where we grab no more than 15 minutes with Nashville founders and executives you know and admire, and some that you really need to know, and ask them one big question. I'm your host, Jonathan Barnes, coming to you from the Work Heartily headquarters in Brentwood, Tennessee, where we help growing Nashville area businesses win through embedded fractional leadership. Today, I'm joined by Elizabeth Yarbrough, founder and owner of Untangled, where she helps you get your business out of your brain to help you grow your team or sell your company. Elizabeth, I am very glad you're here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
Absolutely. Here is your one question. What leadership habit made the biggest difference as your team expanded?
Such a good question. I am going to draw from my first business. Untangled is my second. And there
Okay.
are so many things that I learned as a 27-year-old child, which is how old I was when I started my first business. But in that company, it was in the hospitality industry. We had a team of
Yeah.
20 or so, and the Untangled team was smaller.
Mm-hmm.
But the leadership habit, and it's definitely a habit, I would say practicing empathy it was a huge life lesson for me. I think that there was a time when I thought of empathy as this fixed thing that people have. Maybe
Yeah.
some people don't. And I didn't see it as a learned skill
Yeah.
until one day I saw in myself a lot of room for improvement in practicing empathy, and it completely transformed how I led the team because it kind of took me from this taskmaster
Uh,
to a person who could actually empower other people to
yeah.
get some tasks done. So it was just such a big part of that shift that we all have to make in I'm doing the work versus I'm really developing people who are helping do the work.
Yeah. I think there's a difference between having sympathy and empathy, right? And do you feel like that shift happened just because of experience and age, or was it a specific moment that you were like, wow, I don't understand this. I need to do a better job understanding my team so that I can kind of walk a mile in their shoes, so to speak, and move forward and be able to interact with them that way. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, there was a moment, and I'm sure there was probably a collection of different things, but
Hmm.
vividly, I remember one instance that I won't recount detail for detail,
Sure.
but
Protect the
it was
innocent,
like
right?
yeah. um, I have to ask you to sign a waiver or something to do that.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding. Uh, just an interaction with a person where I was kind of in the middle of something. Someone walks into my office. I wasn't even supposed to be at work that day. I was supposed to be off. So I already was
Mm,
not in a very good headspace. And there was just this interaction where I was very short and I was correct. I was right in what I said that
right.
whatever happened shouldn't have happened. And this thing that played out, I was correct. So it took me probably months of kind of turning over in my head. Why do I feel like I was so wrong in that
Mm,
moment? Because I set an appropriate boundary. I said the right things. I
right.
kind of handled the situation on paper like I thought it should be handled. And it took me a while to
Yeah.
think, but I never put myself in her shoes and
Mm,
said, I'm going to make this decision that you don't like.
yes.
And I'm going to say something that you don't want to hear, but here's where I'm coming from.
Right.
And I can see it from your perspective and I see that, but I'm still going to do this thing that you don't like. That was a
Yeah.
tension that I had not mastered. And I wouldn't say I've mastered it now, but I've made a lot
Yeah.
of progress because it's such a
Yeah.
practice.
I think there's so many moments like that just in everybody's experience. And I'm sure the podcast listeners can have experienced this too, where you are not in the right headspace, like you mentioned, and you're kind of following the letter of the law. But there is a moment and I think it's that human to human connection that you have to maintain the balance between being right and doing the right thing by the letter of the law and communicating that you are trying to understand what's happening in that person's life or their situation or
Mhm.
the work situation that's kind of difficult for them to deal with. And how do you walk alongside them in that? And even like you said, and I think what you said is probably really important, is to say, hey, I'm going to say something that's not, you're not going to like, or we've made a decision that's probably not the best decision that you want us to make, but this is why we're making this decision. In fact, I had a coaching call with one of my clients who's in the hospitality business, and the owners made a decision that was not very popular, but very necessary for the company. And, there was an opportunity for them to explain themselves. And I think they explained themselves as kind of like the old adage of, tell them what you're going to say it, tell them what you said, that kind of presentation or giving a speech kind of framework. They did that. And it wasn't a very popular decision for them to make, but they did it and they explained why and had feedback sessions and learning from everybody so that they could do it. And it was a good thing for the business, but it was a demonstration of how can we help them as a leader, how can you help your team really walk through that?
It's so much about helping, I think. And
Yeah.
as you were telling that story, I was thinking of the episode of Scrubs that I watched last night. Have you watched the new?
What a show. No, I haven't seen it, but I used to enjoy the old one. That was a lot of fun.
I know. It's so funny and it's so good. Like really, really briefly, because it was such a powerful moment. I'm not the biggest Scrubs fan. We've just been watching this new version of it, but Elliot, the doctor, she had a moment with an intern where the intern made a big mistake and someone almost died. So literally life or death. They're in the hospital. And she came down very hard on her and she was right. But then later in the episode, she goes to her and she basically said, I would fail you if I didn't come down so hard on you. This is what was behind that. Like I'm trying to teach you and kind of coach you. And I think it's a perfect example. Another good example, like what you were saying, where having empathy doesn't even mean you're softer or anything like that. It doesn't mean you have sympathy. It doesn't even mean that you're listening to someone talk about how they feel necessarily. It just means you're coming from a place of, I can see this from your perspective and I really care and I'm going to communicate that I care in addition to doing something difficult.
It kind of leads me to a deeper question, because I remember it's only one question, but we're still on that one question. How do you, that leadership habit, as you're trying with your company, trying to get people's business out of their brains, how do you also incorporate the soul of the business, not just the letter of the business, right? We were just talking about the approach of empathy or leading with care as you're talking to business leaders and you're trying to say, how do you operate? Let's get this into a playbook. Let's help you with training. Let's help you sell your business. What does that look like for you? And how do you approach that?
It really is getting to the core of, use the word soul, I think.
Yeah.
Getting to the soul of, you have your processes and procedures, yes. And a lot of business owners will come to me and they're like, we need help with our processes. And then after a while, we discover together for the first time, it's not always about the processes. There's really just a core set of kind of values and frameworks you're using to make all of these decisions. And if you can really teach people, this is what we're making decisions out of, these are the frameworks we're using to act here, they will apply to a million different scenarios. And so you won't need 5 billion processes and procedures, which is great because nobody would use that many anyway.
Right. They might use them, but they might use them to prop other things on the shelf, or use them as bookends. They're so heavy, the big binders, right?
Exactly. So it's kind of listening, it's taking, the first day in our work together is a big brain dump and there's all this complexity and someone will say like, oh, things are just really unique here. They're just so different than everywhere else. And this is how we do everything. And then simplifying that into, okay, there's some patterns in your behavioral norms and how you operate. We're going to start there and train on those. And then if we need a few standard operating procedures to supplement that, great. But we're really cutting to the core of what is the soul of your company.
I think the values of the company, one of my previous colleagues, we always, when we were making either hiring decisions or thinking about, a new initiative for sales or whatever it looked like, or even marketing, like, all right, what do our values say? And he would always ask me that. He was like, well, how does this tie into this value? And, as a founder, you're always just kind of pushing, how do we grow? And it's always nice to have people in your orbit that can ask you, or actually, well, how does this feed into this value that
Mm-hmm.
we work so hard on thinking through, or it's a grid that you can use for making. And it's important to extract that as best you can. It sounds like you do that during the brain dump. I guess for the listeners out there, if you haven't really distilled your values, it's extremely good exercise to get that done. And an adage I've heard is, a lot of company values are, we've got 10 values or 12 values. It's really helpful to be able to memorize them. So I think no more than 5, as I've heard, is the rule of thumb is, hey, just if you can look out on your hand and have one value a day you think about during the work week, it's very helpful, or something like that. Some sort of way to memorize the values so that everybody knows why we're making these decisions, and you can highlight those during team meetings, etc., or during a training module that says, hey, because of this value, it's informed by this, and this is why we do it this way.
And I think a lot of people stop with either identifying them, maybe
Yeah.
giving some examples of what they look like, which is really helpful. But the
Mm-hmm.
next step in really operationalizing them is saying, okay, what are the specific actions that show up when you're, I don't know, emailing, emailing a customer
Yeah.
or interacting with somebody, communicating with your team. Like it's so easy to give these sweeping guidelines, and it
Yes.
takes more work to give really concrete action steps that become
Mm-hmm.
embedded into everything that you do. At the end
Yeah.
of the day, those are really your processes and procedures. It's how your
That's
culture kind of expresses itself.
That is totally true. I had a client that he wanted me to help him with some job descriptions, and I said, well, have you ever thought about putting your values in action setting in or section in your job descriptions? And he's like, no, I've never heard of or thought about that. And I actually, we grabbed all of his values of the company and we put them in each job description, values in action, just like you're talking about for that specific job, like why this matters for this job.
Mm-hmm.
And when somebody signed a new job description or came on board, they would be able to say, yeah, they might not look at it, but at least it's there, right? And they could actually we can go back to it during a performance evaluation or an ongoing one-on-one with your leader and say, hey, this is great. You're doing well. This is why this is important to us, because this is the company value that is actionable. And I think from your perspective, not just for the job description, but for actual processes of the company day to day, if you could review those on a daily basis or a weekly basis or monthly review and just say, this is why we're doing this, it creates the soul of the company based on those values that you have.
Yep.
I think it's wonderful. I wish more people would do what you're saying.
It's hard work. It takes
It
a
is
lot of
hard
hard
work.
work, and we like the path of least resistance.
That's right. Yes, we do. Well, I know we're up on time. Thank you so much for joining on the Work Heartily podcast. I hope everybody gets a chance to listen to this episode, and obviously reach out to Elizabeth if you have questions and you want to get your business out of your brain and help grow your team or sell your business. You need to talk to Elizabeth. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, share the episode with another founder or leader. You can visit workheartily.com to learn how embedded fractional leadership can help you and your business grow and thrive. Thanks again for joining us, Elizabeth, and
Thanks,
we will
Jonathan.
see you. Yeah, see you next time. Take care.
All right. See ya.